When I moved to Nashville, I told myself it was the right thing to do. My daughter Kelsey had just given birth to twins, and her husband Blake worked long hours in real estate. They were overwhelmed, exhausted, and asking, in that way children do when they already expect your yes, for help. So I sold my home in Charlotte, a small craftsman I'd lived in for 23 years. The rose bushes in the yard had finally grown tall enough to peek into the kitchen window. I left them blooming behind me. In Nashville, I moved into a modest rental just 10 minutes from Kelsey's place. We remodeled their kitchen with part of my equity. I stocked their pantry, drove carpool, cleaned spit-up, and whispered lullabies over baby monitors. Kelsey would smile across the dinner table and say things like, "I don't know how we'd manage without you, Mom." Those moments were bright. They felt like something real. But sometimes I'd catch Blake watching me. Not with malice. Just calculation. Like I was a spreadsheet he hadn't finished editing yet. I told myself I was imagining it. Then, one Tuesday evening, everything changed. I'd felt off all day. Light-headed, hands trembling. Around 6:30, I collapsed in the hallway of my rental. Somehow I reached my phone. Dialed 911. The operator stayed on with me until the ambulance came. At the ICU, after they stabilized me, I called Kelsey. She answered on the third ring. "Oh, Mom. We're in Savannah with the kids. It's Blake's vacation week. You'll be okay, nurses are trained for this stuff. Try to rest, okay?" Then the line went dead. I stared at the ceiling. Tubes in my arm. Beeping machines on both sides. Alone. And for the first time since I'd moved, I felt something colder than fear. I felt replaceable. When I came home from the hospital, something had shifted. Not just in my body, though I was still dizzy from the blood pressure meds and sore from the IVs, but in the house, in the rhythm of things, in the temperature of the air around me. Kelsey picked me up. Blake stayed home to finish work, though I saw the golf bag in the trunk when we pulled into the driveway. As she drove, she talked, brightly, rapidly, about the twins, about school registration, about the new air fryer they'd ordered. Not once did she ask how I felt. When we reached my rental, I saw boxes stacked near the doorway. Some of my books. Few framed pictures. "Oh," I said. "Did someone come in?" Kelsey gave a little laugh. "We just tidied up a bit. Thought it'd feel nice to come home to a clean space." He nodded. But the space didn't feel clean. Felt cleared. My calendar was gone from the fridge. A note on the microwave said, "Please don't use this until we fix the circuit." My favorite teacup had disappeared. I wandered into my room. The quilt from Charlotte, the one my grandmother had sewn, had been replaced with a beige comforter. My side table was missing. In its place, a plastic tray with vitamins and a labeled pill organizer. There was a new note. "Please take these with breakfast. Doctor's orders." No signature. Just the tidy, impersonal handwriting I'd come to recognize as Blake's. In the following weeks, the small humiliations piled up like dust I wasn't supposed to notice. Kelsey began speaking to me with a tone I didn't recognize. Soft, slow. Like I was fragile. Or forgetful. "Mom, don't you remember? We already talked about that. I think it's better if I handle Tommy's school pickups for now. You've been sleeping a lot lately, haven't you?" It was always couched in concern. But concern shouldn't feel like a lock clicking behind you. I tried cooking once, simple chicken soup. Kelsey came in eyes wide. "Oh, Mom, no. The doctor said no standing too long. What if you got dizzy again?" She took the spoon from my hand and tossed the pot in the sink. "You could have hurt yourself." I stood there, apron still on, hands still wet from chopping carrots. I wasn't trying to impress them. I was trying to participate, to feel useful, to feel present in a home I had given so much to help build. But every gesture I made was quietly erased. The worst was the stares. One morning, I went to take a basket of folded baby clothes up to the nursery. Blake stopped me at the base of the steps. "Let me," he said firmly. "It's fine," I replied. "It's only a few steps." We said no stairs alone. And blinked. "Since when?" He raised an eyebrow. "Since your episode." It's not safe. I set the basket down. That night, there was a small gate at the bottom of the stairs. The kind you use for toddlers. Except this one had a latch you needed 2 hands to open. I stood in front of it for several seconds, heart pounding. I wasn't sick. I wasn't unstable. I had passed every cognitive test the hospital had given me. But here in this house, I was being quietly rewritten. And the worst part, no one was yelling. No one was cruel. They were just adjusting the world around me until it no longer required my input. They stopped inviting me to school events. When I asked about picture day, Kelsey smiled and said, "Oh, it's just chaotic. We didn't want you to feel overwhelmed." When I asked about the twins' pediatric checkups, Blake said, "It's easier if it's just one of us. Waiting rooms can be long." When the family took a weekend trip to Gatlinburg, they left me behind so I could rest. And every time I asked why, the answer was some version of, "You need to take care of yourself. You've done so much." But none of it felt like gratitude. It felt like dismissal dressed up as concern. One afternoon, passing the living room, I overheard Blake on the phone. He was pacing slowly, voice low but not low enough. "We thought she'd be here for a few weeks. We really need to consider other options now." He paused. "No, not yet. Soon. It's not sustainable." I stood frozen in the hallway. He was talking about me like I wasn't in the house. Like I was a line item. A temporary burden to be budgeted around. That evening, Kelsey asked me not to cook anymore. "I know you want to help, Mom," she said. "But Blake and I have it covered. Just focus on resting." I sat at the kitchen table while she made pasta from a box. I wanted to ask, when did I become something they managed instead of someone they loved? But I didn't. I just watched her stir and remembered a time when she used to call me for recipes, asking, "How do you get the sauce to taste like yours?" Now she didn't even ask if I was hungry. That night, in the quiet of my room, I wrote everything down. Every comment, every rearranged item, every boundary that had closed around me. 'Cause I needed to see it on paper. I needed to know it wasn't in my head. I wasn't forgetting. I was being forgotten. And the difference between those two things was the line between dignity and disappearance. I wasn't confused. I was being carefully erased. Started with stickers. Small ones. Bright dots of color like what teachers use for grading. Red, blue, green, yellow. At first, I thought the twins had gotten into something, maybe marked up the furniture with a new sticker book. But then I noticed the pattern. The red dots were only on my things. My bookshelf. My bedside lamp. The cedar chest I'd brought from Charlotte. Even the footstool I crocheted last winter. Blue stickers marked kitchen items. My favorite frying pan, my baking sheets. Green on clothing. Yellow on art. And then I saw the checklist. Lying on the kitchen counter, half covered by junk mail. A simple sheet of printer paper. Bullet points in a neat typewritten font. Photograph rooms. Mark duplicates. Sort keepsakes. Schedule donation. Contact Holloway service. Prep lower bedroom. Order med cart. The top, transition plan. Phase 1. No names. No signature. Just steps. I stood at the counter, holding the list, feeling my fingers shake in a way they hadn't since the hospital. A few minutes later, Kelsey walked in. She was smiling, holding a laundry basket, hair pulled up in a clip. She saw me with the paper. "Oh," she laughed lightly. "You found our little project." I looked at her. "What is this?" "Just planning ahead," she said, setting down the basket. "You know how Blake is, always needing to organize. We're just trying to be efficient." "For what?" She hesitated a beat too long. "Well," she said too cheerfully, "we thought maybe you'd be more comfortable downstairs. Fewer steps. It'd be safer." "I never said I was uncomfortable." "I know," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But we worry. We just want to make sure everything's in place. Just in case." "In case of what?" Kelsey's smile faltered. But only for a second. "You know," she said. "In case something happens. With your health." I placed the list back on the counter. Felt like placing a boundary. Like drawing a chalk line in sand I hadn't noticed they'd been sweeping out from under me. That evening, I went upstairs to my room and found the door slightly ajar. Inside, things had been moved. My winter sweaters were missing from the closet. The bottom drawer of the dresser was empty. My photo albums had been neatly stacked into a plastic tub labeled "Memory Keeps." When I opened my nightstand, my journal was gone. I walked downstairs, heart pounding. Blake was on the couch. Kelsey was pouring wine. "You moved my things," I said. Kelsey looked up. "Just packed a few things to make space. We thought we'd start getting your downstairs room ready." I didn't agree to move. There was a pause. "You don't have to," she said quickly. "We're just preparing options. Thinking long term." "You took my journal." Kelsey looked at Blake. "It was open," she said. "I didn't read it, I just moved it." I stood there for a moment, feeling something harden inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just understanding. They were not preparing a guest room. They were preparing a transfer. From this life to the next one. And in that next one I wasn't included. I was stored, sorted, donated. That night, I stayed awake long after they went to bed. I sat in the guest room. Not the downstairs one they were prepping, but the tiny upstairs one where I had moved in with trust and love. I stared at the ceiling fan and listened to the silence between its rotations. There's a particular quiet that comes after betrayal. It's not grief. Grief assumes loss. This was different. This was clarity. Dark, cold, ill. I realized in that moment I wasn't losing anything. I'd already lost it. The inclusion, the affection, the respect. It had all been gone for some time. I was only now catching up. In the morning I found Blake in the garage. He was boxing items. "Morning," he said without turning. "Kelsey said we should start early. Want to keep it all moving." "Moving. Decluttering," he said. "The organizer comes tomorrow. They'll help us sort everything out." He lifted a lamp I hadn't seen in years. "I'll take care of it," I said, reaching for the box. But he didn't hand it over. "Let's not make a fuss," he said. I looked at him. And something in me, the part that had always avoided conflict, always yielded, always tried to keep peace, stood up. "No," I said clearly. "You will give me that box." He hesitated, then handed it over. I walked inside, set it on the floor of my room and closed the door. Not to keep them out. To begin gathering what was left. Not of my things. Of myself. I didn't sleep much after the incident with the stickers and the box. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening for movement, waiting for whispers. There were none. Only silence. The kind that thickens, heavy with knowing. At 3:17 a.m. I rose, careful not to wake the floorboards, and crept downstairs. I told myself I was only going to get a glass of water, but I carried my phone with me, screen dimmed, flashlight off. On the kitchen counter was Kelsey's laptop. She often left it open, tucked into a corner where she wrote grocery lists, school reminders, meal plans. She was always logged in. She didn't think she had anything to hide. But that night she did. I tapped the trackpad gently. The screen came to life. No password. I hesitated for one long moment. And then I searched her inbox. The first thing I saw was a flagged email thread titled, "Long-Term Placement and Funding Documents, Evelyn Brooks." Click. Inside was a correspondence between Kelsey and a woman named Carolyn Bates, with a logo at the bottom. Gracewood Transitional Living. The most recent message read, "Hi Kelsey, just confirming that once the power of attorney is fully executed, we'll be ready to receive Evelyn for intake in the new month. All billing, insurance, and personal item storage has been arranged per your instructions. Thank you for trusting us. Power of attorney, intake, billing." They weren't just talking about moving me downstairs. They were talking about moving me out. I scrolled further. There were attachments, forms with my name, my birth date, my social security number. Digital signatures. A scanned document titled Medical Justification of Cognitive Decline. I didn't recognize the doctor's name, because I'd never seen that doctor. My hands began to tremble. I opened another tab and logged into my online bank account. I hadn't checked it in weeks. Kelsey handled everything, she'd said. Made it easier. My pension account had been rerouted. The monthly deposits, once going to my personal checking, were now being transferred into a joint account. Not one I remembered approving. Then I checked the mortgage info. Title: the house I had helped them buy and remodel, the one where I had paid for half the kitchen, the upgraded insulation, the patio furniture, was listed under my name. Just mine. That was why they needed the power of attorney. Not for love. Not for support. For access. They were planning to sell it. Closed the laptop slowly. Stood in the dark. I did not cry. There was no sadness left to wring out. Only a thin, bitter clarity that sat cold in my stomach. I returned to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, replaying every conversation, every smile that had felt hollow, every hand placed on my shoulder like it was steering me somewhere. I looked around the room that had been sanitized of my life, every framed photo replaced with generic prints, every personal item boxed or organized. And I understood, finally and fully, that I wasn't an aging mother they were concerned about. I was an asset, a line item in a budget, a name on a deed. They had dressed their betrayal in soft voices and dinner plates. And I had eaten every bite, grateful to be included. But now I was wide awake. The next day I said nothing. I let them talk around me, over me. I watched Kelsey stir sugar into her coffee, smiling over her phone. Watched Blake take a call in the foyer, nodding along. I let them believe I was still asleep, still obedient, still folding into their plan. But inside I had already left. I didn't know who had helped me before, who had texted me from that unknown number the night I collapsed, telling me not to eat. I didn't know who had slipped those warnings through the cracks of their perfect plan. But they had bought me time, and I intended to use it. That night I packed a small bag. Not enough to be obvious. Just the essentials. My ID. My passport. Some cash I had hidden in a pill bottle, tucked behind books. Dawn I took a walk. I told them I needed fresh air. Instead I went to the public library. Sat in a corner. Logged in to a public computer. I searched for legal aid. Shelters. Fraud recovery. I read articles on elder financial abuse. On coercion. On forged medical records. And for the first time I saw my story, not as something shameful but something common. Women like me, mothers, widows, caregivers, discarded the moment we stopped giving. I wrote down names, numbers, addresses. Folded the paper into my pocket. When I returned home, no one had noticed I'd been gone longer than usual, because they weren't watching me anymore. They were watching the finish line. And they thought I couldn't see it coming. But I did. That night, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to do something they'd never expect. I was going to win. I began the next morning in silence. While Kelsey brewed her coffee and Blake scrolled his phone in the kitchen, I moved through the house like a shadow. Nothing changed outwardly. I smiled when spoken to. I nodded at questions. I sat on the back patio with my tea, just like always. But inside I was already gone. By 10 a.m., I was sitting across from a woman named Naomi. She worked at a local legal aid clinic. She couldn't have been older than 30, hair tied back in a thick braid, no wedding ring, no distractions. She listened without blinking as I laid it out. The forged signatures, the fake diagnoses, the redirected pension, the planned transfer. She didn't gasp. She didn't hesitate. She just said, "Let's fix it." First we froze the joint account. I'd brought my ID and copies of every document I could find, including the power of attorney file I had printed from Kelsey's laptop. Naomi filed a fraud claim with the bank. Then she called a contact at the Department of Elder Affairs. Within 2 hours, an investigator was assigned to my case. Naomi gave me a list of passwords to change. We created a brand new email address. She taught me how to use encrypted storage, How to enable two-factor authentication. I felt like a secret agent. But the stakes were higher than any movie. 'Cause this was my life. My autonomy. My breath. When I returned home, Kelsey was making lunch. She offered me a sandwich without looking up. "Hope your walk was nice," she said. "Peaceful," I replied. I sat at the table, sipped water slowly, and said nothing more. They didn't know I just shut down their access to my accounts. They didn't know I was now protected under a preliminary legal shield. They didn't know I had copied every document, signed every affidavit, reported every manipulation. They didn't know that the woman smiling at their table was no longer their dependent. She was a witness. And she was gathering proof. That night, I retrieved an old iPhone from my dresser drawer. One Blake had deemed too slow and suggested I discard. I wiped it clean. Installed a voice recorder app. Set it to activate with a double tap. Over the next 2 weeks, I recorded everything. Conversations in the kitchen. Murmurs in the hallway. Blake's complaints about getting this done before the end of quarter. Kelsey's comment, half whispered into her wine glass. "She's starting to resist again. We need the final sign-off soon." I stored the files in the cloud. Sent duplicates to Naomi every 3 days. I also started eating separately. Politely, I claimed new dietary needs. Took my plate to the sunroom. Slowly, quietly, I began freezing uneaten food in labeled containers. Date, time, contents. At Naomi's advice, I mailed a few to Dr. Laura Finch, a forensic toxicologist affiliated with the Elder Advocacy Network. She offered to test them pro bono. "I've seen this before," she said. "If there's something in there, we'll find it." Every hour I wasn't under their eyes, I was moving. I rented a post office box under my maiden name. Opened a separate savings account. Transferred what little was left of my pension. I bought a prepaid phone and gave the number only to Naomi and Dr. Finch. I removed every important document from the house. Birth certificate, social security card, property title copies, and stored them in a locked drawer at the legal aid office. I signed a revocation of the power of attorney. Filed it with the county. Notarized. Certified. Delivered by hand. The legal clock was now ticking. Not against me but for me. The turning point came on a Monday morning. I woke to find Kelsey in the living room, holding a folder. She was talking to someone on speakerphone. "We're just waiting on her agreement," she said. "We'll get the signature. She trusts me." I stepped into the room. He jumped. "Mom, I didn't see you." "Who was that?" "Just the care manager. We're reviewing your options." "I've already reviewed them," I said. She blinked. What?" I walked to the coffee table and placed a folder of my own beside hers. Inside, the revocation of power of attorney, the fraud report, a printed statement from the bank, a letter from the Department of Elder Affairs confirming the investigation. She didn't touch it. I met her eyes and said clearly, "You are no longer authorized to speak on my behalf." Her mouth opened, closed. I turned and walked upstairs. 2 hours later, Blake cornered me in the hallway. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. "Protecting myself. You're blowing up your own life." I looked at him steady. "No. I'm taking it back." He stepped closer. His voice dropped. "You think you're clever. You think anyone will believe you over us." "I don't think," I said. "I know." And for the first time I saw it, not arrogance, not control, fear. He saw it slipping away. And he couldn't stop it. That night, I moved my most personal items into a suitcase. The photo album. The letter Frank wrote before his last round of chemo. The earrings I wore to Kelsey's wedding. Copy of my will. I was ready. Not to run. Be free. The silence after exposure is never clean. It arrives sharp, erratic, and loud in its absence. No one says the word betrayal. No one says theft. Not even sorry. Instead they say other things. Things that shift blame and invite guilt and wrap their panic in the soft cotton of concern. Kelsey didn't speak to me for the first 2 days. She walked through the house with a phone glued to her ear, whispering into corners. The twins, sensing tension, grew restless. One had a tantrum in the driveway. I watched from the upstairs window and didn't move. Blake, on the other hand, began a slow campaign of fury disguised as reason. He left sticky notes around the kitchen. "Please don't touch. Mom, this isn't safe. Do you remember?" He began talking to me in short, loud sentences. "Have you eaten? Don't forget your pills. You've been acting differently lately." I didn't respond. I wanted him to hear the sound of his own desperation bounce off silence. On the third day, Kelsey broke. She came into my room without knocking. "You've completely overreacted," she said, voice tight. I looked at her. Said nothing. "You don't understand how hard things have been. You think it's easy raising twins with no help." Kept quiet. She stepped closer. "We didn't take anything you didn't already give us. You gave us the house. You offered to help." I tilted my head. "I offered help. You forged control." She flushed. "You're making this ugly. You made it legal." She took a step back as if hit. Then she turned, stormed out, and slammed the door. That was the last civil conversation we had. Later that evening, Blake posted on Facebook a long, syrupy paragraph with a photo of the twins. It read, "Hard times in our family. Please pray for us. Watching a loved one struggle with confusion is heartbreaking. We're doing our best to stay strong and protect the children. Love is messy." The comments poured in. Prayers, heart emojis, people offering casseroles. One cousin wrote, "Sending love. You're doing the right thing." Another, "Let me know if she needs memory care resources." They didn't name me, but they didn't have to. I printed the post, forwarded it to Naomi. She said it might be considered defamation, especially paired with fraud. "We'll use it," she said. The phone calls started next. First from a second cousin in Ohio. "She's saying you're paranoid, Evelyn. That you're refusing care." Then from an old church friend. "I saw something on Facebook. Is everything okay?" I told them the truth, carefully, simply. And each time I heard the same pause. Then quiet support. "You always were sharper than people realized. Let us know if you need anything." I made a list of every person who reached out. I sent them a short email with links to elder fraud resources, a gentle explanation, and a quiet thank you. If Kelsey and Blake wanted to build a narrative, I was going to build one too. Truthfully. With receipts. Then came the escalation. Blake confronted me in the hallway one morning. "You're destroying this family," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm refusing to be used by it. You think lawyers scare me?" "No," I said calmly. "You scare yourself." He opened his mouth, closed it, turned away. That afternoon I found my car keys missing. The next morning my phone charger was gone. I noted everything. Naomi advised me to begin a daily log. I wrote every incident down, every date, every change in behavior. We submitted the file to the Department of Elder Affairs. Formal inquiry was opened. Kelsey was informed via certified letter. The silence that followed was different. It was tight, calculated. They were regrouping. One night, past midnight, I received an email from Kelsey. The subject line, "Please." The body, "I didn't think you'd go this far. I didn't want this to happen. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Because I had nothing left to say to someone who only found their conscience after being cornered. Days later, the investigator visited the house. A quiet woman in a gray blazer named Lisa. She was kind but firm. Took statements, questions, requested access to documents. I watched Kelsey and Blake crumble in real time. Polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Nervous glances. Lisa noted everything. The next day I received a call. "There's enough here to proceed with charges," she said. "But it's your choice." I asked for time to think. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I wanted the decision to be mine. Not a reaction, not revenge, not pain. On Sunday morning, Kelsey approached me with the twins. She crouched down, They miss you, she said softly. They don't understand what's happening. I looked at them, smiled. Then I looked at her. And for the first time I saw her not as my daughter, not even as a person, but as someone who had used my name like a crowbar to pry open a door she had no right to enter. I reached down and handed the children a small envelope each. Inside, photos I had printed just of us. Birthday cards I'd saved. A handwritten note. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Then I stood up, walked back inside and closed the door. That night I made my decision. I called Lisa and said 3 words. I'm pressing charges. Not to punish. To reclaim. To stop them from doing this to someone else. To make sure the next mother, the next grandmother, the next woman with tired eyes and a trusting heart, wouldn't be so easily erased. The day I left the house, my daughter's house, the one I helped renovate, the one I was nearly pushed out of, the sky was low and silver, full of that soft, expectant hush before a storm. Fitting, I thought. Naomi met me at the curb. She loaded my suitcase into her hatchback while I turned and looked at the porch. No one stood there. No goodbyes. Just stillness. I'd given them a week's notice. Said I would be relocating. The investigator would follow up regarding the charges. Everything had been filed. No one protested. The truth had taken the air out of the room. I didn't take everything with me. Just the important things. My documents. My photos. The letters Frank wrote me when he was stationed in Okinawa. Flash drive with all the recordings. And the quilt my grandmother sewed when I was a girl. Because I was ready to sleep in a house where no one had rearranged my life while I was too tired to resist. The cottage in Taos was smaller than I imagined. 2 bedrooms. A narrow kitchen. Worn tile, cracked paint. And a backyard with low sage and wild sunflowers that bowed in the afternoon wind like old women greeting each other. But it was mine. The deed in my name. The locks turned by my hand. No one else's fingerprint on the fridge, the thermostat, the pill organizer. No one standing in the hallway deciding what I was allowed to remember. It was quiet in a different way. Not the silence of being ignored. The silence of being unobserved. The first week I woke early. Not from noise or crying children or creaking stairs. Just the light on the wall, natural and slow, and the strange sensation of still being here. I made tea and watched the sun rise over a line of cottonwoods. A neighbor brought over a basket of tomatoes from her garden. We sat on the porch and talked about the best way to grow basil in desert soil. No one asked about my daughter, or my grandson, or what happened back in Nashville. 'Cause here I was Evelyn, not Mom. Not the family's backbone. Not the asset. Just Evelyn. A woman who liked tea, basil, and sleeping with the window open. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Kelsey. Handwritten. And steady. I'm sorry. I didn't know how far we'd gone until it was too late. Blake's gone. I don't blame you for anything. I'm just lost. The kids ask for you. I don't know what to say. I didn't write back. Because apologies written under pressure often come soaked in regret, not recognition. And because sometimes forgiveness is not a letter. It's silence. The kind that closes the door gently, not in anger, but with finality. In the months that followed, I began photography classes at the community center. I planted herbs in mismatched pots behind the house. Joined a book club where no one knew my backstory and no one cared to ask. I learned how to make bread that didn't collapse in the center. How to set a bone fire with just dry grass and patience. How to laugh again without scanning the room for what I might be missing. What was being said in corners I wasn't allowed to stand in. I made friends. Real ones. Not out of obligation. Not from blood. But from choosing. From conversation. From common ground. One morning I received a call from Naomi. Just wanted you to know, the case closed last week. And, yes, she won't be charged criminally. But a civil judgment was entered. She can't touch your accounts. She can't claim care duties. She can't access your medical records. And she owes restitution. Took a breath. How much? 22,000. It wasn't everything. Not the full loss. Not the emotional cost. But it was something. It was accountability. Paper. Thanked her. Told her I'd mail something. A gift small and sincere. She laughed. You already gave me enough, she said. You reminded me why I do this. One of the twins sent a letter weeks later. Me. His handwriting was messy, looping too big, uneven margins. Hi, Grandma. I miss your pancakes. Mom said you live far away now. Hope you're happy. Got a turtle. His name is Dandelion. Love, Tommy. Framed it. Hung it above my kitchen sink. I didn't respond, not yet. Children deserve honesty. But not when it comes at the cost of their wonder. One day I'll tell him what happened. Not to make him choose. But to make sure he never grows up thinking love means ownership. Or that silence is the same as peace. Now I wake with ease. I eat when I'm hungry. I speak when I want. No one controls my medication. No one tracks my spending. No one tiptoes around the idea of who I am. I host brunches. I take long walks without telling anyone where I'm going. I get tired sometimes. My bones ache in the rain. I miss Frank. But I never once wish I had stayed. And I never once wonder if I deserved what happened. Because the only thing I ever did wrong was trust too long. And the only thing I ever did right was stop. Stop giving. Stop waiting. Stop apologizing. And start again. On my own terms. In a house where nothing is labeled for storage. And no one is planning my exit. Because this is mine.